You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop, the podcast that explores solutions for sustainability and equity in water. I'm the host, Travis Loop. This episode is from a conversation at the Reservoir Center in Washington, D.C., where Waterloop is a media partner. It's episode number 220, Comments on Current Drinking Water Issues. It features a series of rapid-fire questions with Alan Roberson of the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators, delving into some of the most pressing issues facing the drinking water industry today. The conversation tackles hot topics such as regionalization, consumer confidence reports, the lead and copper rule, PFAS, point-of-use filtration at homes, and the safety of bottled water. Listen as Alan provides expert insights into these critical areas, highlighting the latest developments and regulatory changes that impact public health and water quality across the U.S.
You're in the water loop.
Alan, I just want to go rapid fire with you a little bit on some issues that are always on my mind or out there right now in the drinking water space. Things that you've touched on in the Safe Drinking Water Act 50 episode. Regionalization. Right? You mentioned there's 150,000 different systems out there. I'm always astonished that there is not more of a pedal to the metal on regionalization, because the efficiencies that would be realized, the resources that could be shared, I'm frustrated by there not being more action. This is opinion time from me. Regionalization, what's up with that?
I completely agree with you. I think we need more focus and more resources on it. The small system issue has been around since I started in the 90s. And the numbers haven't changed very much. And there's been some successes, but nationally not so much. And so what I think have some promise are what I've seen in the kind of the report card, the assessing systems, and then the challenge is translating that into mandates and changes. So California has a structure where they're mandating it through the SAFER program is their acronym. Louisiana is just doing scorecards with the thought that, hey, if you've got a C-, people, and I can't remember if it's, I think it's a number, but which easily translate to letter grades for most people, is that the public will demand it and don't make changes. And I think Manny's doing the same thing in Wisconsin, Manny Teodoro. And so I think there's going to be more drive toward what we've seen in Virginia are a lot of county water authorities, both in the suburban areas, but even western and southwestern Virginia, where the county they own and operate the systems, and they'll be dispersed because it's a rural area. But you've got half a dozen good operators. They move around. They've got telemetry. They can see if they have a problem, and if they need to drive an hour to the system because an alarm went off, they can do that. And so that's a structure that works in Virginia based on the Virginia Municipal Utilities Act. So they have state legislation, and then it's worked out, but then there's also the political will at that county level to make all these small towns. They think, I'm gonna have to give up my water tower with the name on it. It's like, no, you don't. The name can stay there. We're just gonna have a higher level of professionalism in how it's operated.
It's going to formally cooperate here.
Formally cooperate.
Absolutely. You alluded to the public communication element, the consumer confidence report. Something else, this thing comes in the mail once a year. Yep. It's a printed letter. I have to concentrate to understand a lot of it, and I'm fairly educated when it comes to water. When is the sector going to really transform this key interface with the public?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges there, a lot of that is in the statute, in the 96 amendments. So if you think about 96, we still talked about print and radio and TV. You're laughing because you think about that now, today, those are like the three least effective communication channels. You think about, I always laugh. I found my job with the American Water Works Association in the classified ads of the Washington Post.
What are those?
Yeah, what are those? And so, we need the communication channels to match what people use. It's off the phone, whatever it might be. So EPA did amend their practice on CCRs for electronic delivery, but I think we got to go back to the statute and streamline it and make it more effective for what we're trying to do. We're going to see some challenges with this, with a couple of the regulations that are related but not related to CCR. The two that are coming are the service line inventories that are initial ones that are due on October 16th of 2024. Because if you have an unknown material on either the public side or the private side, the utilities have to send a notice to that homeowner, the property owner, and say, we're having to do a service line inventory and you have unknown on either sides. That's going to then create a lot of concern because the people are saying, well, I want to make sure it's not lead. Now, where I live, it's a new system, they don't have it, but in systems that have older downtown cores, they're going to get a lot of questions about that. That's one. The other thing is that if you have a lead action level exceedance, you've got to do 24-hour public notification. And we just had a meeting with the EPA yesterday on one of our implementation work groups on the challenges in doing that. And Massachusetts gave a good example because they have that in a state law and they've been doing it. And the experiences they've had, because what they find is that, you have to use, Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter. You have to use
email.
You have to use every channel to try and get that out there. And then how effective is that? So they're trying to use that experience to inform what the other 49 states will do when that becomes a requirement, again, in October 16th of this year.
Well, with the CCR itself, I want to see graphic design. I want to see colors. I want to see clear, either number scores, letter scores, something to convey to people really the quality of their water compared to what's being required. It's difficult.
I think it was helpful, at least for me, when they had the Canadian wildfires and that smoke plume came down on the East Coast. They very clearly air quality index. Here we are, and we had a couple of days here that were pretty bad.
Yeah, you've got colors and numbers,
it's all right
and it corresponds to how dangerous it is.
Where the friends of mine that work for the State Air Regulatory Association said, okay, this number means if you're outside exercising, you need to wear a surgical mask. And so I'm not going to go outside that day. I'm just going to do my exercise indoors. And that worked out all right. It makes it very easy as a consumer and the public to know what to do, what actions you could take.
Yeah. Lead and copper rule. This is one of the big items for a drinking water sector right now. This is a whole podcast we could sit here and dissect. But what's the stance of the sector if you have to summarize it? How are they feeling about this?
I think they're all worried. I think they're all worried about the service line inventories and what has to be done again by October 16th, but then the annual updates, how to figure out the unknowns in a timely manner. With the improvements that were proposed, you have to eliminate your unknowns in 10 years. That's pretty fast. We're trying to figure out how you use modeling, how you validate it, how many potholes you have to dig to verify service materials and model it. It's really challenging. So I think that compounded by the systems that have lead service lines, 8, 10 million, however many they are, getting replacements, how you get consumer buy-in, how you get people to allow you to come in and tear up your front yard or even come inside and look in the penetration of the service line in the basement to see if it's lead or not. There are a lot of issues with working with consumers that the systems are worried about. From the state perspective, there's a whole lot of review and approvals. I can't remember if the number is 28 or 38 new plans that have to be reviewed and approved by the state and the LCRI. It's a lot, a big workload.
And the dollars.
You
got rough estimates of 50 billion on up to get those 9, million lines out of the ground, right?
Correct.
So
the $15 billion that we got from Congress is a down payment.
Yes.
There's still a pretty big balance that's coming due in the next decade.
PFAS, the other big, it's not the elephant in the room, it's the juggernaut that everyone has right in front of them. Again, a tough challenge for you to summarize how the sector's feeling about action on PFAS.
I think the challenge is the systems that may be slightly over the proposed MCLs. They're at 6
parts per trillion.
6 parts per trillion. What steps do we take now to be prepared? Do we start doing, bench scale testing or just wait till it gets done? And it's also then the number of systems that have to put in treatment and the cost of treatment. So in the past, the most systems that had to put in treatment were in arsenic. It's about around 2,000 had to put it in. We're looking at double that number now in PFAS. And again, it's expensive treatment, carbon or ion exchange. So again, the pipeline for figuring out the treatment, doing the construction design, and then getting it built, there's going to be some supply chain issues, be it consulting engineers, testing laboratories, bench scale testing, carbon vessels, contractors can build it. There's a lot to do. And so I think the challenge is for the systems that have both lead service lines and PFAS issues to make sure they have the resources to handle all that.
And I think it's probably a decent number of systems that have to do
It's around
both.
4,000 is the number I've heard. It could be 3,000, it could be 5,000, but 4,000 is kind of, I think we're in that kind of range.
Okay.
The other point with that is that that's today. That may change over time. If you have groundwater plumes that are moving or people are testing at more locations, that number could creep up. But again, it's these people that are at 6 or 8 now that are really struggling on what to do. A lot of treatment's going to go in.
I want to just ask about point of use filters. You mentioned that maybe in the future there's this hybrid system, right, where the utility does the big treatment, it goes to houses, it gets finished in some way. Could you elaborate on that concept? Or the idea that might convey a lack of confidence in what utilities do to treat water? I will go on the record here. I used to be on a well, so I had a complete 6-7 stage RO system under my sink for my tap water. When I moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, I kept that system because we were a PFAS community. We just recently, about a year ago, they brought on carbon filters.
Yeah.
I think we have outstanding water coming from my utility. I still have that point of use there because we're always learning new things about what's in water and what's out there. So that's like an extra just layer for me, but find the question in that
The question is I would repeat it back to you, is that how does point of use work today for compliance and how might it work in the future? So today, there have been a few cases where point of use works fine for, let's say, arsenic treatment is the one I can remember. It works well when the system controls all the buildings. So think about a school. There's been schools in California of arsenic treatment. They put a point of use on every fountain. They can maintain them. They know exactly what's going on. It's worked fine. Even a school campus where you have 2 or 3 buildings that are all owned by the same owner, they can maintain it properly. It's more challenging in communities. So if you have 80 homes and they all have it, everyone agrees to it up front. That's not simple to do. That home turns over and the other person says, no, I'm not interested. Okay. No, that system's out of compliance. So that's today.
Or a year later, or every 6 months, you got to change filters and cartridges.
All that. And then how do you figure out what that interval is? It's a challenge. In some cases, it'll be 6 months. Some cases, it could be 18 months. So in the future, I think it would take some enabling legislation, what we're talking about, having that in there. So you have to do this. It may be you may have to start tying it to real estate transfers, like you have a termite inspection. In my area in Northern Virginia, you're seeing radon inspections being part of house transfers a lot. And so somehow it's going to have to get tied in that everyone realizes that it's really, the water's safe coming out of the shower. The water's safer if you have this device. Yeah. It's still TBD. I'm not saying that's really a likely.
Sure.
I'm thinking you're going to have a system that is not a huge capital investment, a few $100s, maybe, think about what you spend on a TV, and then not a lot to maintain. So I think there's going to be some technology just down that far, but I think it's possible.
Yeah. Last one here that popped up in my head. Could you explain why it's incorrect for people to think that bottled water is safer than tap water?
Yeah. One thing is,
can you restate that in the?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. People ask me all the time is bottled water safer than tap water, and I would say no. That bottled water is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. They base their standards on the EPA public water system standards. So they're almost identical. The challenge is they don't test as often. And the food regulation is based on the HACCP system. So they have a process where they figure out their critical control points and manage the safety through the food manufacturing process. Works fine, generally fine. There's foodborne outbreaks too, just like there are waterborne outbreaks. It happens. The challenge is that then in all the kind of even delivery and storage of it. So an issue with bottled water is the plastic, and what we're finding PFAS in the plastics, leaching from the plastics. There's also then, how long does it stay in the warehouse, the truck, in your house? There are issues with that. And then there's a carbon footprint that's gigantic. If you think about it, it can be a challenge. That being said, I think it's prudent for most people to have a little bit in their house for emergencies. You live on the coast, you've got to have, I'm sure you have flashlights and radio, some of the basics. And yeah, I have a case of little bottles that I kind of rotate out because we've had power outages, we've had issues where I live, and it's for an emergency. Yeah. But if I want to have a portable water with me, I've got a handful of water bottles at home. I go to the tap, fill it up, take it to play tennis, pickleball, hiking, you name it. That's what I use.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. To find all episodes, sign up for email updates, and connect on social media, visit waterloop.org.
Waterloop, Waterloop, Waterloop.